3-day weekend, you guys! 3-day weekend. In the UK, and I'm not quite sure whether this covers actually the whole of the UK, we have 2 3-day weekends in the month of May, which to all 9-to-5ers you will understand is an absolute godsend. Please tell me that you agree that a normal 2-day weekend is just not enough. On Sunday, you're just thinking about work the next day. Saturday's the only decent day. Seriously. In the month of April, I participated in the Paper vs Pixel challenge that was hosted by Hotkey Books and the author of Fearsome Dreamer, Law Eve. You basically had to pick a form of book, whether it be physical books or ebooks, and read that form for the entire month. Now, when I was actually making this decision, I had read about 16 books in my Goodreads challenge, and literally it was a 50-50 split between physical books and ebooks, as I'd read 8 Kindle books and 8 physical books. So I just went for the physical books because I knew that I had a load of books on my bookshelf that I wanted to read. Anyways, into my April wrap up. First of all, I read Say Her Name by James Dawson. This is given to me by Hotkey Books as a proof copy. I've actually got a written review of this on my blog, so I will link that down below for you to go and have a little read of. But at the event, we were lucky enough to actually meet James Dawson, and he advised that he was charged with the challenge of creating the scariest YA horror book. And in all honesty, I believe that he has accomplished this to the full. The story revolves around the retelling of Bloody Mary. I mean, you probably all know the story about looking into a mirror and saying Bloody Mary 3 times. Well, in the book it's actually 5 times, but as far as I'm aware, I thought it was 3 times. But anyways, you're looking into a mirror and saying Bloody Mary a number of times, and then she appears. But it's kind of like a retelling of that, but in a boarding school with a bunch of teenagers, and it's set in the modern day era. But with regards to the scariness of the book, I would say that it is scary. I had thoughts before I read this that it was going to be good, but not scary, because of the fact that I don't think that books can be scary. I personally don't see how books can be scary because of the fact that you have to read everything that happens. You have to read that somebody's hiding behind a door and looks round, for example. Whereas when you're watching films, it kind of does scare you because you're not anticipating it and you're not reading everything that's actually happening as it's happening. But I'll have to admit that this scared me. There was a scene that was set in a bed, and I was reading in bed at the time, and it freaked me out. I kept on looking around me because I was pretty scared, and it definitely sent a chill down my spine. Next I read It's Kind of a Funny Story by Ned Vizzini. This revolves around a boy who is depressed and checks himself into a mental hospital. In all honesty, I don't really want to go too much into this book because I really can't remember too much about it. I don't want to make up anything that's going to kind of influence the way you feel about it. I just didn't think that it was very memorable, and I rated it a 3 out of 5 on Goodreads, which to me means that it's okay. It wasn't amazing and it wasn't bad, it was just pretty average, but I just didn't think that it was very memorable, to be honest. Next I read Stray by Monica Hess. This revolves around a world where orphan children get to go in a simulator called Path. Now Path is a way of giving these children the childhood that they never had. They are basically living their life seeing through the eyes of Julian, who lived the ideal childhood according to the government. Now, not everything is as it seems, and Lona16 Always, who is our protagonist in this book, actually escapes and starts finding out a few secrets that she didn't know before. This book was fantastic, and although it doesn't necessarily contain a lot of plot, it mainly revolves around the character development. I thought that was absolutely fantastic to read about, because basically these kids go from being in their pods 23 hours a day with only 1 hour of actually being social in the real life, and then they get put out into the real world where everyone's social 24 hours a day, people interact with you, people touch you. In Path, they weren't allowed to actually physically interact with any of the other Pathers, so when people touched them in the real life, then they were totally freaked out, and it was great to actually see the development from somebody that was so shy and so withdrawn to somebody that's really out there and confident and is willing to risk it all to save the other children. And I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. Plot twists in this book were fantastic. The clues for the plot twists were put in there, but obviously in a good book you're not going to know that they're actually clues in the first place. But when I actually got to the plot twists at the end of the book, I was like, whoa, hold on, I remember this. It's just fantastic how everything linked together. It was like a jigsaw puzzle coming into place. Next I read City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare. Now this is the 4th book in the Mortal Instruments romance series, and I wasn't entirely impressed. Without giving away too many spoilers, I felt as though this was too romance based. There wasn't enough action and actual storyline. It revolved around the characters rather than the plot, and unlike Stray, that did revolve around the characters, I felt as though this book needed to revolve around the plot. This is the 4th book in the series out of 6. It needs to have some kind of plot to bring it forward to the 6th book. So I felt as though it lacked in so many departments, and I just found it boring. About 150 pages in, I almost put this book down because I just couldn't stand where this was going, and I didn't even know where it was going, to be honest, because it was revolved around a love story and it was not my cup of tea at all. The only reason I carried on with this book was because of the fact that I want to complete this series, because I do genuinely enjoy this series as a whole, and towards the end of the book it did get a little bit more action-packed and interesting, but it all was a little bit too cliche for my likings. Next I read The Eyre Affair by Jasper Fforde. Now let me give a little warning to anyone that wants to read this book. If you want to read this book and you want to read Jane Eyre, then read Jane Eyre first, because this book actually spoils the whole of Jane Eyre and the ending. So it's up to you whether you want to read it. I read about a quarter of Jane Eyre before I actually read this, but I wasn't completely fussed whether I knew the ending or not, as somebody had actually told me that it does spoil it for you, so I was warned in advance, so I'm just warning you in advance. Anyways, this is the first book in the Thursday Next series, which revolves around, obviously, Thursday Next, and she is a literatech, which is a literary detective. Thursday works on crimes of a literary nature, and this one revolves around the theft of a manuscript of a book and what effects this actually has on the characters on it. There was a multitude of different sub-stories in this book, and I thought that they were all linked in incredibly well, and this didn't actually take away from the main story. It just all seemed to mesh together extremely well, and nothing seems to get left behind, nothing seems to get forgotten, and everything was resolved at the end. I thought this is a fantastic book, full of wit and puns, and it's just something that is a light-hearted read, and I think, as I've said many a time, that everyone should pick up a Jasper Fforde book. He is my favourite author, and I just can't recommend him enough. I love these books so much, and I am excited to get on to the next one. Now that was April. Have you read any of the books that I've read, and have you got any opinions on them at all? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them, and I will speak to you in my next video. Bye guys!